The story of the pharaohs isn't just a tale of kings and queens. It's the very soul of ancient Egypt, a civilization that has captivated humanity for millennia. When we think of Egypt, we conjure images of golden mosques, towering pyramids, and silent sphinxes gazing across the sands of time. At the heart of this incredible world was the pharaoh, a figure who was more than just a ruler. They were considered a living god on earth, a vital link between the mortal world and the divine cosmos. Their duty was to uphold Ma'at, the sacred concept of order, truth, and balance. Without the pharaoh, it was believed that chaos would engulf the land. The Nile would cease to flood, and the sun might not rise. This divine responsibility made them the absolute center of Egyptian life, religion, and government for an astonishing 3,000 years. Imagine the Nile Valley before Egypt existed as a single, unified state. It was a land of two halves. Upper Egypt in the south, a narrow, rugged valley, and Lower Egypt in the north, a vast, fertile delta fanning out into the Mediterranean Sea. For centuries, these two regions were separate, each with its own ruler, its own crown, and its own identity. Then, around 3100 BC, a legendary figure stepped out of the mists of history to change everything. His name was Menes, also known as Nama. He was a powerful king from Upper Egypt who marched his armies north, conquering the delta and uniting the two lands under a single rule for the very first time. This act wasn't just a military victory, it was a foundational moment, the birth of the world's first great nation-state. The unification under Menes was a monumental achievement, one so significant that the Egyptians would celebrate it for the rest of their history. He founded the first dynasty and established a new capital city, Memphis, strategically located where the valley meets the delta. From this powerful center, he and his successors could govern both lands effectively. To symbolize this new unity, the pharaohs created the double crown, or the Shent, which combined the white crown of Upper Egypt with the red crown of Lower Egypt. Every time a pharaoh wore this crown, it was a powerful reminder that they were the lord of two lands, the one who held the fragile balance of the kingdom in their hands. This was the beginning of the Pharaonic Age, an incredible journey that would shape the destiny of Egypt for generations to come. The importance of this early period cannot be overstated. It laid the groundwork for everything that followed. The concept of divine kingship, the administrative systems needed to run a large country, and the powerful symbolism of a unified state were all born in this foundational era. The early pharaohs of the first and second dynasties worked tirelessly to solidify their control, putting down rebellions, establishing trade routes, and developing the writing system of hieroglyphs that would allow them to record their history for eternity. They were the pioneers, the ones who took a collection of scattered communities along the Nile and forged them into a mighty civilization, setting the stage for the incredible achievements that were just over the horizon. Following centuries of consolidation, Egypt entered an era of unprecedented confidence, power, and ambition, the Old Kingdom. This was the age when the pharaohs truly cemented their status as gods on earth, and they began to express their divine power in a way the world had never seen before. They built for eternity. The rulers of the third and fourth dynasties, in particular, commanded immense resources and a highly organized workforce to construct monuments that still defy belief today. This wasn't just about building large tombs, it was a national project, a physical manifestation of the state's power and the pharaoh's connection to the heavens. The pyramid shape itself was deeply symbolic, seen as a stairway to the stars, allowing the soul of the deceased king to ascend and join the gods. The revolution in architecture began with a genius named Imhotep, the vizier and chief architect for King Djoser of the Third Dynasty. Before Djoser, pharaohs were buried in flat-topped mud brick structures called mastabas. But Imhotep had a revolutionary idea. At Saqqara, he decided to stack 6 mastabas of decreasing size on top of one another, creating the world's first major stone building, the Step Pyramid. This was a breathtaking leap forward, a structure that dominated the landscape and declared the pharaoh's power in a way no text could. It was a tangible bridge between the earthly realm and the divine, a monument that announced a new age of Egyptian capability and ambition, setting a precedent that his successors would strive to surpass. This ambition reached its zenith during the Fourth Dynasty, under rulers like Sneferu, who perfected the pyramid form with his Red Pyramid at Dashur, and his son, Khufu. It was Khufu who commissioned the most famous monument of all, the Great Pyramid of Giza. For nearly 4,000 years, it was the tallest man-made structure on Earth. Built with over 2 million stone blocks, some weighing as much as a bus, its construction remains a marvel of engineering and logistics. Alongside it stand the pyramids of Khufu's successors, Khafra and Menkaure, guarded by the enigmatic Great Sphinx. These Giza monuments were more than tombs. They were the heart of a vast funerary complex, a powerful statement of the Old Kingdom's wealth, organization, and the unquestionable authority of the pharaoh. But this incredible age of pyramid building could not last forever. The sheer cost, in terms of resources and manpower, was immense. By the end of the Old Kingdom, the power of the central government began to wane. The pharaohs had granted more and more land and tax exemptions to provincial governors, or nomarchs, and to the powerful priesthoods. As a result, wealth and authority slowly drained away from the capital at Memphis and flowed into the provinces. The last rulers of the Old Kingdom were weaker, and the magnificent structures they built were but shadows of the Giza giants. The delicate balance of Ma'at was beginning to fray, and the unified state that had built the pyramids was slowly drifting towards division and chaos. After centuries of glorious stability, the Old Kingdom collapsed, plunging Egypt into a dark and confusing chapter known as the First Intermediate Period. It was a time of profound crisis, where the central authority of the pharaoh completely disintegrated. The divine order of Ma'at seemed broken. For over a century, Egypt was no longer a single, unified nation. Instead, power fell into the hands of the local nomarchs, who ruled their provinces like petty kings. Rival dynasties emerged in the north at Heracleopolis and in the south at Thebes, each claiming to be the legitimate rulers of all Egypt. It was a period of civil war, famine, and social upheaval, a stark and terrifying contrast to the peace and prosperity of the Pyramid Age. The art and literature from this period reflect the deep sense of anxiety and despair that gripped the nation. Texts like the Admonitions of an Egyptian Sage paint a grim picture of a world turned upside down, where the rich had become poor, invaders plundered the land, and respect for the old traditions had vanished. People questioned the very foundations of their society, even the power of the gods and the divinity of the king. The grand, confident art of the Old Kingdom was replaced by more regional, cruder styles, as local workshops operated without the guidance or resources of a royal court. This was a humbling experience for the Egyptians, a stark reminder that their civilization was not invincible, and that chaos was always lurking at the edges of their ordered world. Yet, even in this darkness, the seeds of reunification were being sown. In the south, the rulers of Thebes grew increasingly powerful. They were a determined and ambitious line of princes who saw themselves as the true heirs of the great pharaohs of the past. One of them, Mentuhotep II, embarked on a long and difficult campaign to bring all of Egypt back under his control. He fought his rivals to the north, slowly but surely conquering the provinces one by one. His eventual victory around 2040 BC was a momentous occasion. He had successfully reunited the two lands, ending the chaos of the First Intermediate Period and ushering in a new era of stability and hope. Mentuhotep II's triumph marked the beginning of the Middle Kingdom, often called Egypt's Classical or Golden Age. He established his capital at Thebes, which would grow into one of the most important religious centers in the ancient world. The lessons of the collapse were not forgotten. The pharaohs of this new era understood that they could not rule by divine right alone. They had to be seen as wise and just shepherds of their people. They reformed the government, curbed the power of the regional governors, and invested in projects that would benefit the entire country. The trauma of the First Intermediate Period had forged a new kind of kingship, one that was more pragmatic, more responsive, and more determined than ever to maintain the unity and prosperity of the nation, of the Ka. The Middle Kingdom was a glorious renaissance for Egyptian civilization. With the country reunified under strong and capable pharaohs like Amenemhat I and Senusret III, a new era of peace, prosperity, and cultural brilliance began. These rulers were not just remote god kings like their old kingdom predecessors. They portrayed themselves as vigilant shepherds of the people, responsible for their welfare. They undertook massive projects to reclaim fertile land, such as the drainage of the Fayum Oasis, which became a breadbasket for the entire country. They also strengthened Egypt's borders, building a series of formidable fortresses in Nubia to the south to control trade routes and protect against incursions. This was a period of smart, strategic governance that brought stability and wealth back to the Nile Valley. This renewed confidence was beautifully expressed in the art and literature of the time. Middle Kingdom art is often noted for its remarkable realism. While Old Kingdom statues showed pharaohs as idealized, flawless gods, the portraits of Middle Kingdom rulers like Senusret III show careworn, realistic faces etched with the burdens of leadership. It's an incredibly human and powerful style. This was also a golden age for Egyptian literature, producing timeless works like The Story of Sinuhe, an epic tale of an Egyptian courtier's exile and return. These stories explored complex themes of loyalty, identity, and the Egyptian worldview, and they were so popular that they were copied by scribes for centuries. The religious landscape also underwent significant changes. While the sun god Ra remained important, the local god of Thebes, Amun, rose to national prominence. The pharaohs merged him with Ra to create Amun-Ra, who became the supreme state god, the king of the gods. A vast and powerful priesthood grew around his worship at the great temple of Karnak in Thebes, which was expanded by successive pharaohs. The concept of the afterlife also became more democratized. While in the Old Kingdom, only the pharaoh was guaranteed a glorious eternity, funerary texts and spells, known as coffin texts, were now available to wealthy commoners, offering everyone a chance to navigate the underworld and achieve immortality. However, just as with the Old Kingdom, this period of strength and unity eventually came to an end. After a series of less effective rulers, the central government once again weakened. At the same time, a new threat was emerging from the northeast. Groups of people from Western Asia, known to the Egyptians as the Hyksos, began to migrate into the fertile Nile Delta. At first, they came peacefully, settling and integrating into a society that had grown complacent. But as the pharaoh's power faded, the Hyksos leaders saw their opportunity. Using superior military technology, like the horse-drawn chariot and the composite bow, they seized control of Lower Egypt, bringing the glorious Middle Kingdom to a shattering close. The humiliation of foreign rule by the Hyksos during the Second Intermediate Period ignited a fire of fierce nationalism in the hearts of the Theban princes in the south. They would not tolerate a divided Egypt. After a long and bitter struggle, the Theban king Ahmose I successfully drove the Hyksos out of the delta and reunited the country once more. This victory, around 1550 BC, marked the beginning of the New Kingdom, the most glorious and powerful era in all of Egyptian history. Determined never to be invaded again, the pharaohs of this period adopted an aggressive foreign policy. They were no longer content to just defend their borders. They set out to build an empire. Egypt became a major military power, conquering territories in Nubia, Canaan, and Syria. This imperial age brought unimaginable wealth, tribute, and new ideas flooding into Egypt. The capital at Thebes became a cosmopolitan metropolis, and the pharaohs used their vast resources to embark on the most ambitious building program the world had ever seen. They constructed the magnificent temples of Karnak and Luxor and carved their eternal resting places deep into the rock of a secluded valley, the Valley of the Kings. This era produced some of history's most famous rulers. There was Hatshepsut, a remarkable woman who ruled as a full pharaoh, often depicted with a male body and a false beard, who oversaw a period of peace and prosperous trade. Her mortuary temple at Deir el-Bahari remains one of the most stunning architectural achievements of the ancient world. Later in the New Kingdom came a pharaoh who would challenge the very foundations of Egyptian religion. Amenhotep IV, who changed his name to Akhenaten, declared that there was only one God, the Aten, the physical disk of the sun. He closed the traditional temples, moved the capital to a new city called Amarna, and unleashed an artistic revolution that favored a strange, almost alien-like realism. This was a radical departure from thousands of years of tradition, and it did not last. After his death, his young son, Tutankhamun, the famous boy king, was guided by advisors to restore the old gods and abandon Amarna. The memory of the heretic King Akhenaten was systematically erased from history, a project so successful that he was virtually unknown until the 19th century. The New Kingdom reached its final peak of power and influence under the long reign of Ramesses II, often known as Ramesses the Great. He was a master of propaganda, a tireless builder who covered Egypt with monuments, celebrating his own achievements, most famously, the incredible rock-cut temples at Abu Simbel. He fought the rival Hittite Empire to a standstill at the Battle of Kadesh and secured decades of peace and prosperity for Egypt. But after his 67-year reign, Egypt's power began a slow decline. A series of invasions by mysterious groups known as the Sea Peoples weakened the empire. Economic problems mounted, and internal power struggles between the pharaohs and the powerful priesthood of Amun-Ra eroded the king's authority, heralding the end of Egypt's imperial age. The end of the New Kingdom ushered in another era of fragmentation and instability, known as the Third Intermediate Period. The empire was gone, and once again, Egypt was split in two. The pharaohs ruled from Tanis in the northern delta, but their authority was nominal. The real power in the south lay with the high priests of Ammon at Thebes, who governed Upper Egypt like a semi-independent theocratic state. This division of power created a period of political weakness that left Egypt vulnerable. The tombs in the Valley of the Kings, once symbols of eternal power, were systematically plundered for their gold to fund the rival governments, a sad testament to how far the state had fallen. This weakness attracted the attention of ambitious neighbors. For the first time in over 500 years, Egypt fell under the control of foreign rulers. A dynasty of Libyan chiefs who had long settled in the delta took the throne as the 22nd dynasty. While they respected Egyptian traditions and ruled as pharaohs, their control was often tenuous, with rival factions and local princes vying for power. Following the Libyans came the Nubians from the kingdom of Kush to the south. The Kushite king Pi saw himself as a true successor to the great pharaohs of the New Kingdom and marched north to reunite Egypt, establishing the 25th dynasty and briefly reviving Egyptian culture and monumental building in a classic, old-fashioned style. The Kushite revival was short-lived. A far more ruthless and powerful empire was rising in Mesopotamia, the Assyrians. With their brutal military tactics and iron weapons, the Assyrians invaded Egypt, sacking the great city of Thebes and driving the Kushite pharaohs back to Nubia. After the Assyrians withdrew, Egypt enjoyed a brief final burst of independence during the late period under the Sate dynasty. These pharaohs looked back to the glories of the Old and Middle Kingdoms for inspiration, consciously trying to recapture the art, culture, and spirit of a bygone golden age. But Egypt was now a pawn in a much larger geopolitical game, caught between the rising powers of Babylon and Persia. In 525 BC, the inevitable happened. The mighty Persian Empire, under its king Cambyses II, conquered Egypt. For most of the next 2 centuries, the pharaohs were not native Egyptians, but were appointed by a distant Persian emperor. Although there were several spirited rebellions that managed to restore Egyptian rule for brief periods, the nation was no longer the master of its own destiny. The land of the pharaohs, which had once controlled a vast empire, was now just a wealthy province within a larger one. The long, slow twilight of this incredible civilization had begun, and the stage was being set for one final dramatic transformation. The long era of Persian domination came to a dramatic end with the arrival of a new, unstoppable force from the west. In 332 BC, a young and brilliant Macedonian general named Alexander the Great marched into Egypt. The Egyptians, weary of Persian rule, did not resist. Instead, they welcomed him as a liberator. In a masterful political move, Alexander traveled to the remote Siwa oasis to consult the oracle of Amun. There he was famously declared to be the son of the god, a proclamation that legitimized his rule in the eyes of the Egyptian people. He was crowned as a pharaoh in Memphis, respecting the ancient traditions and presenting himself not as a conqueror, but as a rightful successor to the ancient kings. This moment marked the end of the last native Egyptian dynasty and the beginning of the end for the pharaonic age itself. Alexander did not stay in Egypt for long, but his impact was profound. He founded a new city on the Mediterranean coast, Alexandria. Designed to be a hub of Greek culture, commerce, and learning, It would soon become the greatest city in the ancient world. After Alexander's premature death, his vast empire was divided among his generals. Egypt fell to Ptolemy, who established the Ptolemaic dynasty. For the next 300 years, Egypt was ruled by a line of Greek-speaking pharaohs. While they presented themselves as traditional Egyptian rulers on temple walls, they governed the country as a Greek kingdom, with Greek as the language of administration. The final pharaoh, the intelligent and ambitious Cleopatra VII, tried desperately to restore Egypt's power, but she was ultimately defeated by another rising empire, Rome. Her death in 30 BC marked the final, definitive end of pharaonic rule. So why, after thousands of years, does the legacy of the pharaohs continue to fascinate and inspire us? Their achievements were simply staggering. They created one of the world's first nation-states, pioneered monumental stone architecture, developed a complex system of writing, and created a sophisticated and deeply spiritual culture. The pyramids, the temples, the golden treasures of Tutankhamun, these are not just ancient relics. They are powerful testaments to human ingenuity, ambition, and the enduring quest for eternity. The pharaohs built a civilization so stable, so confident, and so magnificent that its echoes can still be felt in our world today. They left an indelible mark on the story of humanity. The journey from Menés to Cleopatra is an epic saga of unity and chaos, of towering strength and humbling decline. For 3 millennia, the pharaoh stood at the center of the Egyptian world, the divine anchor that held the cosmos in balance. They were builders, warriors, administrators, and gods on earth. They created a world of incredible beauty and profound mystery, a civilization that believed in the power of order and the promise of eternal life. And though their world has long since vanished, the legacy of the pharaohs remains, carved in stone and written on papyrus, a timeless story of a kingdom that dared to build for eternity and, in doing so, achieved a kind of immortality all its own.